how's it going, everybody? It's the Lobo Pack podcast, back here again with Trevor Weeks, currently with the BCSO. It's an honor to have you on the podcast, especially since you're serving in law enforcement right now. Can you tell us a little bit about your origin story, why you came to Army ROTC at UNM and became an infantryman?
Yeah, absolutely. For having me. Honored to be here. What has changed since I was here? So I grew up in the East Mountains outside of Albuquerque, went to Manzano High School. And while at Manzano, 9/11 happened, and then the Iraq invasion happened. So I graduated from Manzano in 2003. And, that really inspired me. I had a lot of friends going off to college and pursuing different careers, and I really wanted to serve my community. And I thought that this was a great opportunity to join the Army and serve my community that way. So coming out of high school, I knew that I wanted to join Army ROTC.
Do you have anybody else serve in your family who was enlisted or officers?
My grandfather served in the Army Air Corps in World War II. I was very close with him. He was a huge inspiration for me. And so he really encouraged me to join the Army mostly. But he also kind of pushed me towards Air Force, but I was mostly interested in the Army.
And then specifically like the officer route?
Yeah. I didn't really know for sure coming out of high school what exactly I wanted, but my mom was pretty insistent that I go to college, especially, New Mexico has the lottery scholarship, and take advantage of that opportunity. And so when I learned I could do both, go to college and join the Army and then come out an officer, that's ultimately what I decided to do.
Why decide to do SMP also? Was that something you found immediately as you came to UNM, or?
I really wanted that experience to experience what an enlisted soldier experiences. I knew that the experience was different between enlisted and officer. And so I had a really good friend from high school that also joined the Army ROTC program with me. And we both did the SMP program as military police in the reserves. So we left our freshman year at the end of our freshman year. It may have been our spring semester of our freshman year, and went to basic training together, joined the reserves together. I thought that experience was invaluable for me personally.
So can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Was basic at Fort Leonard Wood, or was that at Fort Knox?
Leonard Wood, so it was one station unit training. So I did both basic and I've been in the Army.
Yeah.
Over 10
one
years.
station. It's AIT and basic together.
That's right.
Okay.
And that was a great experience. I went to Missouri in January and had not experienced anything like that before. Ice storms, everything was frozen. It didn't make any sense to me. It was very cold, but really learned, like the nuts and bolts, the grunt work of being a soldier in the Army.
Why choose MP? Was it just something that opened up? Or?
For a long time knew I wanted to join law enforcement. And so, I don't know how it is now, but at the time, the Army Reserves only had like non-combat arms. So that was available here in Albuquerque. There was a unit in Albuquerque that was military police. And so we just sort of selected it. It just made sense. Everything fit right. Timing to go to basic training, everything was right about it.
When you go to military police training and you come out of it, do you get law enforcement is it sort of like an academy where you get credentials to be like a federal law enforcement officer, or does that not apply?
Doesn't really apply. So when I joined BCSO much later, about 7 years later, I had some of that foundational experience, but I didn't get to skip any parts of the academy or everything. I went through everything just like everybody else.
Do you get also extra points for going into law enforcement for BCSO? You were in prior service military. How does that work?
That's more for
veterans. Okay.
I think personally it helped me, but I think in the eyes of BCSO or any other law enforcement agency, they really seek veterans because they have that, they're service minded, they're dedicated. So I think that, and then also they're required to have preferential hiring for veterans also.
But coming back from basic training in AIT and starting off college, what was the battalion like back then?
It was pretty small. I think I don't remember exactly when the first graduating class was, but maybe 2005 or 6. So there weren't any MS4s when I first started. They were all MS3s. We were at a tiny building over off of Lomas and Yale. So basically there was a headquarters building. It was just offices, and we were having classes up in Mitchell Hall. but then our headquarters was down there, so it's kind of a mess. At some point, they put in a double wide trailer in the parking lot just east of the building there. So there was like a trade off because we didn't have anywhere to park anymore, but we at least had a classroom close to the headquarters. But it was really fun building the program. There wasn't really like that foundational outline of what our program should look like. We could see what other programs look like, but being a part of building it was really fun.
And then as an MS, one going into it, coming back from basic and AIT, were you getting a criminal justice degree, or what you decided to go into?
My degree was history.
Okay.
And so I like to joke with people that if you have a history degree, you're either going to join the military, become a teacher, or join law enforcement. So kind of knocked off 2 of those 3 things. Yeah, it was a great experience doing history.
What sort of experiences did you have? You said that you had gone through air assault and airborne school.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to be able to do that. One summer, it was between my MS2 and MS3 year. I didn't really have any plans to go anywhere, and I got a call last minute from the senior military instructor that said he knew I could climb a rope. He said, "Hey, can you come down here?" The person that we had going, like, I don't remember, failed the PT test or personal reasons couldn't make it. So can you come down here and do the PT test? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So came down, knocked it out, and I was on the plane like the next day to go to air assault. Airborne, I had a little bit of advanced warning, but I really chalk it up to just like being ready and then being available. So being physically fit, mentally ready, but then also saying like, I'll clear my calendar to go do whatever. So I was fortunate enough to do both.
I'm kidding. It's super hard for our cadets even to do airborne. That's sort of every 4 years we're getting a slot.
Wow.
I know. Air assault, tons of cadets go. We're always getting a slot for somebody. So it's nice having that to basically give to the cadets to incentivize, hey, doing your military service, and also just training them, because the knots and stuff you learn in air assault is like invaluable.
Yeah, I felt like air assault really combined the physical with the technical in a way that airborne doesn't. I think airborne is probably more fun, in my opinion. But, you're having to study, but you also have to go do your 12-mile road march. It's just kind of combined everything. So I thought that it was a great experience.
Did you decide, or at what point did you go to Fort Knox was it at Fort Knox for your cadet training that you basically have to be certified like to
LDAC?
LDAC?
I don't know, is that what it's still called? Leadership
It's called
Development and Assessment.
Cadet Summer Training now. Was it at
Is it Fort Lewis?
It was at Fort Lewis. Okay. And what was that experience like going to Washington to knock that out?
I thought it was super fun. It's basic patrolling. Yeah, I had a great time. Made some good friends that I'm still friends with. Fort Lewis is beautiful, but it's like long nights and it feels like you're in the jungle. So I thought it was a great experience.
Coming back from that and being now you're a senior, were you planning on trying to go active duty, or did you know you wanted to go into the National Guard?
I knew that I wanted to go into the Guard as an infantryman. I had signed a GRFD, a Guaranteed Reserve Forces Duty Scholarship. I think it was my junior year. And so, I decided that with my wife. I was married at the time, looking at starting a family. She had a career here, and we had lots of family. And so I felt like it was a great opportunity to do both, serve in the military, but then also fulfill my desire to become a law enforcement officer.
You had been doing the SMP program with the reserves. How did that translate over to doing infantry in the National Guard?
Again, I think that you get a lot of credit when you spend time learning what the basic job is. A lot of times, when a brand new second lieutenant comes out and they take over a platoon or whatever their responsibility is, it's important to spend that time learning from the soldiers and learning what it is that they do. And sometimes it's like suck work, but it's important for an officer to understand that, because you're going to be ultimately the one deciding that they have to do it, when they have to do it, maybe sometimes how they have to do it. And so that experience as an SMP gave me a lot of credit with soldiers, having been enlisted and been through basic training. There are ways to do it without doing the SMP program, but for me, that really worked. So that as an officer, when I eventually commissioned and joined my unit, I can spend some time at the burn pit, just kind of joking with the guys and experiencing the suck a little bit. I think that's really important.
Yeah, totally. As an officer, like you're in charge of planning and stuff like that, but it's very important for you to understand what soldiers are going through because you're one team in the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, soldiers, like the Army's a professional fighting force. So soldiers are going to carry out orders and objectives and accomplish the mission. But you gain credibility as an officer by sharing in those experiences. So I think it's really important.
So then, going into your last year at UNM, what were you expecting from your unit as soon as you got there? Because a lot of our National Guard Reserve, or National Guard mainly, like we had an engineer just graduate last semester or in May, and then she's already working down in Rio Doso helping out with that. And then another one got called for Zia Shield to help out with that. So a lot of National Guard soldiers are like immediately put into, you're a leader, like go get it.
Yeah, I have kind of a similar experience as well. So I commissioned in 2008, but my bullock wasn't scheduled till 2010. So I was a recruiter here at Army ROTC for a little while. And before I went to bullock, Hurricane Gustav landed in Louisiana and Texas, like kind of in the Gulf, like Panhandle area there. And so I went with a contingent to Louisiana to help deliver food and water, things like that. And you're just kind of thrown right into the mix, and people look at you to make decisions immediately. And the experiences I had here at Army ROTC really helped me with that. And I think that's an important mindset to have as you're a junior and a senior. You need to really start to embody that role as the decision maker. In the middle of like a chaos or a complex problem, being able to break down that problem into simple steps, like you're starting to learn that here. And so you're exercising that decision-making muscle so that when I got out and, at Hurricane Gustav, having to make decisions about different missions or what units need to be engaged in what way, I had that experience here. So, the National Guard was great for that because they didn't look at me as you're a lieutenant who hasn't been to bullock yet. They looked at me as like, you're a lieutenant and you're in charge of this unit. There was like no differentiation. I thought that was valuable.
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting. Al, can you elaborate a little bit more about your experiences there? Like, how long were you there helping out with Gustav? Was it a month or two? Or?
Yeah, this was probably 2000. It could have been 2008. It might have been 2009.
Mm-hmm.
We were there 2 or 3 weeks. And I remember we drove our Humvees there, and we had to stop in Texas for a couple days, but to wait for like the hurricane to hit. And we were ultimately put in Alexandria, Louisiana, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were stationed out of Alexandria. We were there for about 2 weeks, and my platoon and I did a long mission down into the bayou, and that was a different experience. My first time in Louisiana, speaking with the good people from Louisiana, but some of them I could not understand at all. But driving around to these different flooded areas, and people were very grateful to see us, to be out there helping the community. So I think we were down south for about a week and then came back up and met the unit. By that time, everybody's kind of packing up and getting ready to head back home. Mm-hmm. But really got to operate autonomously down in the southern part of the state as a platoon leader. It was really fun and a really formative experience for me.
Okay. Can you tell me about your relationship with your company commander back then, or even meeting him?
Yeah, my company commander was an APD officer on the SWAT team. So he was like very influential for me, both, in that profession, in law enforcement, but then also in military. It was a great experience. He spent a lot of time developing us personally. He would give us assignments, and it sounds dumb, but they were like reading assignments, because he really felt like, if you want to be a professional, you don't just show up on the day to do the job. You have to spend a lot of time being ready, getting ready. And so he had us reading different books, like Gates of Fire, books that you might not think are necessarily leadership books. I'm a reader, so it really spoke well to me. And then we would meet and go for a long run and discuss the book. And I thought that was really valuable, that he spent that time investing in me. We had the opportunity to do it. Our unit wasn't getting ready to deploy. I wasn't qualified at bullock yet. And so, in that free time he spent developing me.
Okay. And then what happened next after you graduated and in the National Guard? Were you looking to be a law enforcement officer somewhere?
Yeah, so it was hard because I hadn't had Bullock yet, and I didn't know exactly when. I think I was originally slated for 2009, and it got pushed back to 2010. And so I didn't know, I couldn't, in my mind, focus on two things: going to a police academy, and then right after that, going to Bullock. So I'd kind of made up in my mind, like, I want to knock out my initial military training first. And then when I get back from that, then I'll focus on going into law enforcement. While I was at Bullock, I was with a company out of Albuquerque, but I didn't realize that there was a company out of Las Cruces, Charlie Company from the same battalion, that was getting ready to deploy to Kosovo. And so as soon as I graduated from Bullock, came up like on the state roster that there's a qualified infantry lieutenant, and they basically sucked me into Charlie Company. I got back in September of 2009, and they're slated to leave to their pre-mobilization training in January. Just a couple months home before I left.
Can you tell us a little bit about Bullock back then for infantry? Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, with time, you look back and everything's fun. So I don't know if you interviewed me back then, if I'd say everything was fun, but it was awesome because, everybody's there going through the same thing, experiencing the same suck. And in the same way LDAC was, where you're rotating through different leaders every week, that's sort of the way Bullock worked. I lived in the hotel on base. If I was active duty, then I would have been able to get housing, or like if my wife were able to come with me. But I lived in the hotel. It was great. I was like 2-minute jog to where we started PT every morning. The rhythm at Bullock at the time usually was you show up on a Monday, you have like your classes for whatever you're doing that week. Tuesday first thing, and your PT and everything. Tuesday first thing, you either show up in PT, or sometimes you just go get issued all your equipment and you head out to the field. You're in the field Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, sometimes into Friday. Come back, clean equipment, do whatever other paperwork or testing you had to do, and then done for the weekend, like Ranger School Light, something like that. That is exactly what it was like. As I was shortly after I left, I heard that it was going to start changing. I don't even know what it's like now. Maybe you know?
Yeah, it's pretty much, other than the primarily light infantry squad, platoon, all that tactics, they've been able to fit in a week of combatives, a week of mounted operations. So like working with the Bradleys and things like that, to try to give those lieutenants who are going to go to those units, hey, this is what you can expect.
Yeah.
So they've expanded it, I would say.
Yeah. We didn't do either of those. I think maybe some combatives, but I don't remember if it was an entire week or it was sort of broken up.
Yeah. And then again, it changes. So it's like,
exactly. Each class is a little different.
Right.
We did have a culmination exercise. I'm not sure they still do. And it was, at the end of a field problem, week-long or 2-week-long field problem, we had a forced march for about 20 miles. I don't think they tell you exactly long. Then you get into a patrol base and then assault a city.
Yeah. We still do the assault on the city as a company.
That's right.
Leader Ford's the end of that.
That's right.
So, but yeah, now that you have come back from, being or being certified as an infantry lieutenant, what did you know about what was going on in Kosovo to prepare you to go?
Yeah, I know anything. I knew that we had, there had been a conflict there, a few years back. So I found out I was joining Charlie Company, getting ready to go. I bought a book about the conflict, tried to read that in time. But I really started to learn about it when we went to JMRC, Joint Multinational Readiness Center in Germany. And we were there, we met up with other NATO allies and sort of trained together. And that's when I started to dive into what some of the real problems were in Kosovo.
Cool. So yeah, what was it like getting so you had basically got a book, not really 100% sure what's going to happen, but what was it like being in Germany and working with partner forces?
It was kind of crazy for a number of reasons. There's just so much newness to it. I'm joining a platoon that didn't have a platoon leader for several months, so we're new to each other. A platoon sergeant, new to him, didn't really know much about Kosovo. were the problem with that they've had with I think genocide and problems with Serbia, but then meeting these other forces like counterpart lieutenants that are going to be there with you, just like a lot of culture shock.
Because who was there working with you as far as partner forces?
Yeah, we worked with France, Germany, Turkey. We had another contingent of Hellas, Greek soldiers.
Huh.
Small group, they're engineers. Those are primarily who we worked with. There were other forces in country for sure, but those were our partners.
Then what was your mission? Peacekeeping? Make sure nothing sort of crazy happens, or?
Exactly.
Okay.
So, the Polish were also there now that I think about it. We were, we had two missions, peacekeeping, and then the administrative boundary line between Serbia and Kosovo, just sort of enforcing that, making sure that there's like free flow of goods, traffic, but also there's a problem with, black market and smuggling and illegal wood cutting. So we would patrol this like super mountainous area. That's what we did for the first half. In the second half, in July or August of 2010, NATO had made some sort of announcement that maybe they were going to like start pulling back forces from Kosovo. That prompted the Kosovo Albanian government to send a contingent of their police force, paramilitary force, to some of these gates along the administrative boundary line to sort of take control, to assert like their autonomy over the region, which then prompted a backlash from Serbia, and there was firefight on the border. And then we came in to basically stop that. A lot of the buildings had been burned down, and we spent the rest of the deployment, we called it Gate 1, post set up out there, and basically try to help enforce this administrative boundary line.
Okay. And being new to a platoon and a company, like, what was it like to, as a lieutenant, what helped you and what didn't help you coming into a new organization?
Yeah. So coming in, they had already been training. The company knew that they were going to be going to Kosovo for a few months. So they were already doing field exercises without me, the platoon sergeant, acting as both the platoon sergeant and the platoon leader. I had to establish credibility with the guys, show my worth. I think that the first meeting I had with the platoon sergeant, he basically said as much, that he's like, "Sir, I've been like, stay out of my way a little bit. I've been doing the job for a while." And I knew right there, like, he doesn't understand what I'm bringing to the unit. So when we were at the first pre-mobilization site was Camp Atterbury in Indiana, and we started getting more complex missions, being able to bring everything I learned at Army ROTC and then at IBOLIC to develop plans that made sense. And I got buy-in from the squad leaders and buy-in from the platoon sergeant. It really helped us start to click as a unit. And that tension that we had started to melt away when you realized, like, we're on the same team. This is a team sport, and we're working together to accomplish the mission. I did that, not only being technically proficient, knowing how to write op orders and knowing how to break down complex problems, but also kind of like what I mentioned earlier, you show up early, you do some of the grunt work with them. Now, you have important other tasks, so you don't sacrifice your other tasks to do this. But, if you get your job done, it's not like, oh, it's lights out for me. If there's still work to be done, showing up as a leader and doing that work with the soldiers. And so really important to establish that credibility with them. And I did that through that pre-mobilization training, through some of the suck, the late nights and staying out in the cold. That was really important to get done. I'm thankful that we had that opportunity to do that before we got in country and be able to work out some of those problems.
And then how long were you in Kosovo for?
About 9 months.
Okay. And then other than being on Gate 1, did you have any other opportunities to work with? Were you just basically training out with like the French or other counterparts over different areas, like Gate 1, to like being relieved from it? Or
so before that conflict happened in the border, we would kind of rotate different mission sets with different units. But once that happened, the infantry company, the U.S. infantry company, was at Gate 1, and we rotated in other platoons. So we had the Polish with us for a little while, and then the Germans. And then as we were getting ready to pull back and be relieved by a different company that was coming in, we had both. We had 2 platoons of U.S. and a platoon of Germans and a platoon of Turks, which was interesting because the Turks and Germans didn't exactly get along. And so, we kind of acted as that liaison between them because we still have
Mm-hmm.
mission to do.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Did you see any forces like maybe the Germans or the Turks have TTPs that were different ways of doing operations that looked like hey, we should take some of that and try to incorporate that?
Yeah. We kind of had an idea that there was going to be tensions flaring up prior to it actually happening. And so we spent a lot of time training crowd and riot control there was also Portuguese and Hungarians. See, so I'm remembering more
Yeah,
as we go. So we went to the Portuguese camp and did their crowd and riot control. And, Europe experiences, at least in 2011, Europe experienced more protests than the United States. And so we didn't really have that knowledge base and spent a lot of time. They had like Molotov cocktails that they made that they would throw at our feet so that we would be able to practice, not overreacting, how to react. And so thankfully we didn't ever have to use any of that, but it was really important. My platoon went and spent a week with them and then took all that. And then we were the trainers for the rest of the company and other U.S. forces.
While you were there, did your platoon or company do any partnership, like shooting their weapons, then shooting yours, or different cross type of cultural or training with different units?
We would do patrols occasionally with some of the other forces. I'm trying to think. I feel that we had a qual deployment and we had some Germans join us for that, but it wasn't like widespread. It was more of like, like a camaraderie type thing.
And then once left Kosovo, what was it like coming back with your platoon?
When we got in country, there were Humvees there already for us. And then the Humvees actually got stranded at Gate 1 because like bridges got destroyed and stuff. And so we had a lot of air missions between Gate 1 and Camp Bondsteel. But we came back in December, right in time for Christmas. So it was really good reuniting with families and then being able to do something unit-wide together. All of our families get to meet each other. And I hadn't experienced that, because I joined the unit late. So my wife didn't really know anybody else or too many other people at the time. So and then, you have some time off to spend with family before you have to go back to real life. So.
Is that when you began like your law enforcement career?
Yeah, actually before I left country, I reached out to a recruiter with BCSO that, hey, I'm currently deployed, should be back December, January sometime. Very interested. And they had an academy class coming up in April. So I came back. I had 30 days of leave. And so that put me like right around the beginning of February. And I came back to Army ROTC, basically recruit a little bit, do some PT. And then I started with BCSO in April of that year.
Okay. Coming to BCSO, from all the experience you had, they made you go through the academy. Is it just because they need you to learn the laws?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a 6-month academy and it is vastly different in a lot of ways than my experience in the military. So it was really important that I went through it. There's a law block, primarily shooting pistol in law enforcement. So there's like a 2-week block for that, 2 or 3 weeks. But then you also learn rifle and beanbag and all the other firearms. The defensive tactics. So I'd been through Army combatives, both enlisted and then a little bit as an officer in Bullock. And what they teach in law enforcement is like so different because your goal is to effect a lawful arrest using like the minimum force necessary. So in combatives, it's often like, well, you're like fighting for your life. If you're in hand-to-hand overseas, this is a deadly situation, you're going to win the fight no matter what. And law enforcement is, hey, I need to like stay in this fight long enough for my backup to arrive or until I can put them in handcuffs. And it is a lot that, in my opinion, was the hardest block of the academy. It is so physical and you fight instructors every day. It's draining and learning the techniques. It's kind of jujitsu based, wrestling based, not a ton of striking, but very physical. So yeah, you spend all this time learning all these individual skills, and then that culminates to a officer survival block, and that's where you're putting everything together. They simulate taking calls for service, and you could show up and like one call for service could just be like a regular old report, like, nothing happened. You go to the next call for service and like somebody wants to fight. And so it's like a real fight. We don't hold back. And so it was important. The military experience I had, this is a long way to answer your question. The military experience I had was really important and set me up to be successful in law enforcement. But it was really important that I went through that law enforcement training because it was different enough and specific enough to the job that I would have been lost without it.
Especially since it's that long, it really does, I'm sure, prepare you for being on the street. Bernalillo County is so big. Like, how does that work? I mean, because of the academy, does everybody get to slot where they want to specifically go in the county? How many officers are there?
Yeah, so when we're fully staffed, we have about 330 or 340. Everybody, when you come out of the academy, goes to Field Services Division. And that's really where you learn how to be a cop. You learn how to do interviews and write reports and do investigation. You learn when like somebody's lying to you, or maybe when somebody's just nervous and so it seems like they're being deceptive, but they're not really. And so that's the foundation of everything else you do in law enforcement. So you come out and you spend, minimum of 3 years in field services, and then you can move on to a number of other jobs. So, we have a bunch of detectives, special victims unit, violent crimes, homicide, white collar. We have SWAT and K9 and traffic and DWI. We have an air unit. So there's like any place you want to go, you can, but you got to do your 3 years in the field first.
Okay. And then as soon as you got out of the academy, graduating, what's that experience like? Do they have you on the street that very next week? You're with an FS or a supervisor or something, like somebody's training you on the job sort of deal?
It's within a day or a couple days. It's kind of up to the sheriff. Sometimes he'll give a few days off before you start. It's on the job training. We have field training officers, and now currently our field training program lasts 4 months, and each month it changes to a new training officer. And that's where you learn it, like makes that connection from like a classroom setting or like a sterile environment to like how to do the job on the street. The field training officers bridging that gap for them.
Okay. Nice. And then since being, you're from ROTC here, became an infantry officer, what happened? Do you see a lot of either people from the Army Reserve, National Guard, or had just gotten out of active duty coming to become police officers in Bernalillo County? Or
yeah, we have a lot. I don't know the exact percentage, but we have a bunch of people that still actively drill in the reserve and the guard, and we have a ton of veterans, a lot of veterans in BCSO. And Bernalillo County is very, very veteran friendly. You get a ton of hours every year. So basically, to be able to go do your training. So, you don't have to put in leave. You don't have to take leave without pay. Bernalillo County says it's important enough to us that they actually will continue to pay you even while you're doing your 2-week, or if you have to go to like captain's career course or something until you exhaust those hours. And there are other ways you can take vacation or whatever you might need to do. Very, very veteran friendly. It's been really great. And I still meet people and I'm surprised when I find out, oh, you're a veteran too. That's great.
Nice. Coming, like we're getting back to after getting out of the academy, where was your Army career at then?
Yeah. Let's see. So I came back from Kosovo and I became an XO. Did that, let's see, maybe 2 years as an XO, year and a half, something like that. I don't remember exactly. And then from there, I became assistant S3 at the Infantry battalion.
So for being an XO, like that's a big deal. Like you're working with your company commander and first sergeant, and it's a different game. You're not with a platoon anymore. So the unit, was it primarily as an XO? Did you have Humvees attached to you? Like what sort of systems were you working with at?
Yeah, we're still like infantry company, but we did have some Humvees, and then, all of our firearms and other specialized equipment. I mean, thankfully it wasn't too heavy logistics side, but you really started to feel it when you were preparing to go to the ranges or you're going to annual training, whatever it might be. That's when you like start to earn your money as an XO.
Like just be, I remember one of the biggest things was the XOs we were always looking at, being in my unit, was that, they were always planning, ahead of missions. Oh, hey, make sure that you have class 4 razor wire, stuff like that. So when you do get done attacking an objective, it's a heavy on the logistics side of it, like you were saying. And that's why I was just wondering, systems break down and you have to, get those systems up. That's why I was particularly interested.
Things get lost. Yeah. Company commander and the first sergeant, they're responsible for such a wide range of things. As the XO, you're like trying to fill that gap. Like, what are they missing? What can I prepare for them ahead of time? And I found that challenge to be really fun to try to do. You show up to a meeting and you have all the answers already. You have things planned out and ranges lined up and whatever it might be. And I thought that that was a great experience.
How often, when you were there, were your drills, what do they look like? Are you always going to the range or getting ammo to go do that? Or, how does that work?
I can't remember specifically. Most drills were spent in the field or at the range.
Where specifically at? Was it in Santa Fe?
We used DOE's, the Department of Energy ranges on Kirtland Air Force.
Okay.
A lot. Primarily when we were going to shoot. They were great to work with, easy to work with. Know a lot of them because a lot of the people out there had worked for AP or BCSO in the past, and so had those connections to be able to set up those ranges.
I didn't realize DOE had like ranges or whatever.
Yeah, we're training center for like a lot of their basic SWAT, advanced SWAT. Sniper school is here for DOE because they have couriers that escort nuclear weapons and material here in Albuquerque.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's it's cool to hear about.
Yeah, they are a great resource for us. We still less now, but like at BCSO, I went through their firearms instructor course and their sniper course out there, and yeah, really fortunate to have them here.
Nice. When did you get the opportunity to go through those courses for BCSO? Was it something like as you're saying, when you get done with your 3-year time, you could sort of go where you want or apply for that?
Right. So I joined SWAT right around my 3-year mark. And along with that, I had the opportunity to go to firearms instructor course. And that's great because I can come back and start teaching right away with BCSO, either our basic academy or some of our advanced instruction. While I was on SWAT, everybody starts as infantry operator. So that's, you're standing at the barricade, at the armor, and you're the one making entry into the house. Deeper or high ground is what we call it. Harder to get onto, prove yourself over time. So it had been about a year and a half before I had the opportunity to be high ground. And that was contingent on passing the school. So I went to their school, DOE's, and then came back and went to a BCSO specific school for high ground.
All right. Interesting. What's that sort of like? Like, are you shooting targets at like over 1,000 meters away, or how does snipers work in a SWAT environment? Because I understand trying to get like higher ground to observe what's going on, but
yeah, DOE prepares you for like anything. So we were shooting out to about 1,100 yards. You weren't like graded on it, but we did spend a day shooting at distance and trying to judge distance and spot and call for each other. Most law enforcement engagements happen at like 100 yards or less. But your primary role as a high ground officer, you're observing. You're the eyes for the infantry, and any movement you might see and calling out different danger areas, whatever it might be. That's what you spend most of your time doing.
Have you seen, like, since the years have progressed, SWAT teams using more drones to get even more eyes on a situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier we have a helicopter, two helicopters, and one's like primarily for like rescue, and the other one, or A-Star, is for observation. And so, oftentimes that will launch. Helicopters have limited fuel, crew rest requirements, hours that they're 10-8. So now, BCSO has come a long way, and basically having drones be not exactly, the buzzword is drone as a first responder, but not exactly that. But they're a resource that has been decentralized. Units in the field are carrying drones so that when they need to, in emergency situations, launch them. And I BCSO is kind of at that cutting edge, kind of driving that. And we use them on SWAT calls, canine searches, foot pursuits for somebody's fleeing. There are a ton of different applications for it.
That's really awesome to hear. Just how, I guess, modernizing and also just, getting another leg up to help out with whatever you guys can do. But going back to your military career, what was it like? I guess now you're an XO working with your company commander at first started. Did you have a good relationship with them? And do you have any advice from like students or new lieutenants getting into that role as an XO in a National Guard unit?
Yeah. I did have a good working relationship with them. It's really, really important to understand how your company commander operates, how they like to be communicated with, how they like to plan. And it's also important, especially you come from like a platoon leader was so fun. Doing missions and leading people and mentoring people and change and shape people's career, right? That was so fun. And then you become an XO and it would be easy to say, this is so boring. And you can't do that because it's an important part of your development as an officer. That as a person, really, life, you can't always be out there like leading a platoon. So embrace the role change, and like anything else, like show up and know how to do the job. Meet with your supply sergeant. Spend that time learning their system. They're the ones, they've seen XOs come and go. You're new. And so you have just a lot of learning to do. So not only do you need to learn like all those things with your company commander, but you also need to learn like what is the nuts and bolts of this job? What is it that they're doing? And, a lot of those requests you're going to either work with your supply sergeant or it's going to come through your supply sergeant. And so that relationship is important to nurture. And part of that mindset as an XO, you're like in the customer service business. Your customer is your company commander, but ultimately it's the soldiers. And if, you show up and there's not enough ammo, it's like there's a couple people to blame there. The XO might be one of them. And you have that mindset like, I'm going to provide the appropriate logistics so that the guys can have the best training possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally know that makes sense because, as you rise in leadership, it's not that everybody can go and lead a platoon, but, that higher echelon is that logistics, being able to prepare your whole unit for something. But, from that, did you do anything annual training wise over those 2 years of being an XO that was really awesome? Did you go anywhere?
Yeah, we went to Fort Bliss, and while we were there were some special forces guys, and they were supposed to be training a foreign company, and their company didn't show up. I don't remember the exact details. And so the special forces guys basically hung out with our company during that time, and it was great because they were able to like train us and like accomplish their mission, but then we were able to learn a lot from them and spend time with them. That was a great experience, really fun. Some great guys.
Nice. And then, like you were saying, you eventually transitioned to be the AS3 in your battalion. And what was that experience like going from being an XO into like battalion operations?
That every experience I had was like building blocks. I thought that was invaluable time as the XO because you're learning, the AS3 is making these, or the S3 is making these decisions that are affecting all the companies. Like, so you could see it both as the XO and now the person making the decisions. Eric James was a great mentor. I learned so much from that guy and how he would problem solve. And while we were there, our battalion, the battle staff training team was doing an evaluation of us. And going through that experience as the AS3, you're that decision-making muscle that I talked about earlier, you're really actually, it's like on high drive at that point as you're making these important decisions at the battalion level.
During that time from your XO to your AS3 time, did you deploy with your battalion at all during that time?
No, we didn't have any battalion deployments at that time. We did deploy another company, maybe to Egypt or something like that, but the battalion stayed back.
And then what happened from there? Did you decide after a year or two that you wanted to transition out, or how did you come to the conclusion?
At this point, I was being new at BCSO. I'd been on swing shift and then graveyard and on SWAT and
Is SWAT a full-time position for BCSO? I was
No.
wondering that.
Yeah,
Okay.
at BCSO, it's part-time.
It's part-time.
Yeah, so you still have your regular shift that you have to show up to, but then we have a full day of training on typically Thursdays, maybe Wednesdays now. So once a week, you have a full day of training, and then, high ground, you have other obligations that you might do, plus then call outs are unpredictable. Um, so, I have my family obligations, my full-time professional life obligations, and the Army National Guard. I loved all of the opportunities it gave me, but it was taking more and more of my time. And I was like, man, I really felt like I could be great at all three. That I could be a great dad and great in the National Guard, or a great dad and great at BCSO. But to do all three, I don't think that I would have been successful and would have devoted all my attention to it. And so, it took a lot of talking with my wife and ultimately decided in 2015 to get out.
Okay. And what was your transition, or I would say, what was your transition out of your unit? Was it pretty easy to?
Yeah, very easy. National Guard was supportive as I left. It was hard to go, but I still talked to him. I saw Eric James a week ago. He was the S3 at the time. So, everywhere you go, you create like these little families and you leave them behind, but they're still like a little family. So Gerald Burkhart was Master Sergeant in the S3 shop. And I talked to him about a month ago. And you know what? That was kind of sad, leaving that era and leaving that part of my life behind. I don't regret it, but at the time it was definitely hard to give up.
Yeah. Leaving that to pursue other things. Moving forward with your career in policing, how did you go from you had already done being a part of SWAT and then also high ground? At that point, are you becoming more of a leader in that community, such as like, do you go to sergeant then, like supervisor, or how does it work? Because now you're a lieutenant, sir. So
so I had also worked as a detective in the Special Victims Unit, and then I promoted to sergeant, and I was a sergeant for like 3 years or something like that.
And how long does it take somebody to get to that position? Like 6 or so years to become a sergeant?
Yeah, you have to do a minimum amount of time off of FTO. I believe it's 5 years until you can promote to sergeant, and then you have to do a minimum amount of time before you can promote to lieutenant. Some people choose not to, and I think that one thing about the mindset that the Army gave me was that drive to promote, that drive to achieve something. Not everybody that joins law enforcement has that, but I do see a lot of people that were veterans that have that drive also, mindset that like, no, I want to be a leader in this department. So most people, don't promote right away as soon as they're eligible. I chose to, so right around the 6-year mark. And then I was a sergeant for 2 years. I've been a lieutenant for, boy, my math is off. I've been with the department almost 14 years now, and I've been a lieutenant for 3 years.
Okay. And what is that like? Do you have 3 officers under you, and are you on patrol basically in certain parts of the...
It's so different.
Okay.
Than the military. So again, in BCSO, you go back to Field Services Division. So you're out on patrol, taking calls for service, or your guys are, and you have a squad. So my initial squad had like the bummer days off of Tuesday, Wednesday, but it was like about 10 people that worked for you. So it'd be more like a squad leader.
Okay.
And then I was the sergeant for South Swing Unit, and there are 2 squads on that South Swing Unit. There are 24 people total, but it was split between 2 sergeants.
Okay. Is a lot of your time spent closer to Albuquerque or the city? Or is there still stuff that just goes on out in, let's say, the rural side of New Mexico?
Yeah. Bernalillo County, like you mentioned earlier, it's pretty big. We police all the unincorporated areas of Albuquerque. So that's the entire South Valley. The North Valley, parts of Paradise Hills, North Albuquerque Acres, and then the East Mountains. And so, let me silence this. Sorry. So like the higher crime areas are obviously closer to the city. These mountains can be pretty quiet. And then, we have specialty units that like SWAT will help with APD sometimes or help with state police. As a detective, sometimes you get cases from the city, but you do a lot of stuff in the unincorporated areas.
And then after your time as sergeant, did you become was lieutenant the next step, or did you go back to being a detective, or how did that work?
Yeah. So I was a sergeant in the field for about a year. And then I became the sergeant for the Special Victims Unit. And that's the unit I'd been a detective in. That unit investigates crimes against children, sex crimes, elder abuse, and animal abuse. And I was there as the sergeant for 2.5 years. That's probably the most rewarding work I've had in BCSO was with the Special Victims Unit.
I read a little bit more about that because obviously, these horrific crimes occur. Somebody has to, I guess, seek justice for that. What was, I guess, most rewarding for you?
Yeah. As a detective, really invested blood, sweat, and tears into my cases and seeing these abusers brought to justice. As a sergeant, I really got to amplify that. I had 7 or 8 detectives working for me and just making sure that we're putting out the best cases possible, that we are doing like complete thorough investigations, working with the DA's office to ensure that these cases are getting prosecuted. Part of doing those thorough investigations also is exonerating someone if they've been falsely accused of something. But to build that team, it was the same rewarding experience that I felt as a platoon leader. You're taking these people that have like a common goal or mission, but are coming from all different walks of life or different experiences in BCSO and getting them all on the bus so that we're going the right way and that we can be like the best unit possible. And there was tremendous job satisfaction in building out that team, bringing good cases, and creating that like really healthy relationship with the DA's office.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally understand that by making great teams. It's funny. I used to do police exploring, and sort of the same idea that everybody was trying to, be the most professional, most like best unit to go and do things, whether that be a traffic stop or white collar crime or whatever it was. And even in the Army, it's the same way. Yeah, like just building your soldiers and your squad members, team members, platoon members to be something more than what they are now, whether that be sending them to a school or helping them with their PT or whatever, or even technical knowledge. But that seems super, super rewarding to hear. And then as a lieutenant now, how does that work?
Yeah. It's kind of like the transition to XO, where, on one sense you could look at it and be like, because you do a lot more administrative work as a lieutenant and you could have like a sour attitude and not enjoy it. But I really think that's the wrong mentality to have, understanding the value you can bring as a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant in field services initially for about 6 months. And then I was the lieutenant for administrative services division. And that is running, like doing a ton of logistics stuff, like buying cars, inventory, and you're working with the procurement team and like body armor, so like individual equipment, but also department equipment and working on grants and all this stuff. And so, I really kind of like had to set aside like the catch the bad guy aspect of law enforcement and focus on what equipment do the people doing the job need? How do I get it to them? And I really embraced that role. I had a lot of fun with it, problem solving, working with vendors. And I again found that to be super rewarding, and having that mindset of you're in customer service. Your customers are the deputies. Your customers are the command staff. That's what we call, folks. Finding out what the people need and then finding a way to get it. That problem solving is like really satisfying for my brain, and I had a really good time doing that.
Because you're like actually making a difference. Like, I totally know what you mean, because there was one time where my Humvees for forever were neglected. I figured out one day, I was like, all right, I'm going to figure out how to do the AC. That's super rewarding in itself because you're making a difference in that way.
How often, if the soldiers or deputies, they're dealing with equipment that's either broken or not like functional for how they do their job, a lot of people just shrug and be like, yeah, well, this is just the way it is. Like, our cages in the back of our car always suck, or the AC is always broken on the Humvees. And our job as officers, our job as leaders is like, that's not okay. We, like Jocko talks about extreme ownership. And I really think that that's important in all things. And as a leader, you should never shrug and be like, man, the cars just suck. Like, that's never an okay answer. And so that's my advice for cadets as they're getting ready to take over. And that's going to give a ton of credit to you as an officer when you're leading these soldiers, when they're like, oh yeah, for years we've had to deal with this piece of crap door on this Humvee or whatever, and you show up and find out how to fix it. No one else is going to do it but you. So I had that opportunity to do that recently for department-wide, just unit-wide.
Okay.
I thought it was great.
Awesome. And where does your career go from here as far as being a lieutenant? Like, what is your structure, I guess, for BCSO?
Yeah. So from the Administrative Services Division, I did a year with in training as the director of training. Just recently became the assistant division commander for field services. So still a lieutenant position, but working directly for the chief deputy, which is pretty high up. So the rank structure from lieutenant, then we have captain, and then we have a major. And the major is sort of like a chief of staff kind of thing, like problem solver, like integrated into the chain of command, but also like does special projects that the sheriff might want, or follows up with special projects, has like some tasking authority. So it's lieutenant, captain, then there's the major, and then chief deputy, and then undersheriff, and then sheriff.
Okay. Interesting. Now that's super in depth and important because I don't know any of that. So.
Yeah. And every department can be a little bit different. They're all structured generally the same, but they may be called different things.
Yeah. I've seen that. Any words of advice for our cadets graduating either into the National Guard or into active duty?
I really want to harp on, and I've mentioned it a few times before, Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs.
Yeah.
He wrote this thing one time about someone had written Mike Rowe and said, hey, I want to find a job where I can work outside with my hands, but I want flexibility so that I can start a family and travel. And I want upward mobility. And had like this big long list of things. Mike Rowe responded back basically like, yeah, that job doesn't exist. What's important is like, you should go into a field, whatever it is, in the National Guard or active duty with your transportation or infantry. Mike didn't say that. I'm saying that. Mike said, you should show up and be the first one there. You should learn how to do the grunt work and the muck work. You should be prompt in your responses whether it's an email or a tasking or a project. You should be the last one to leave. And that's going to give you a firm foundation of what it takes to do the job, but it's going to prove yourself to those around you, your peers, your soldiers, the officers above you. So, there's a lot to be said about just showing up and doing the job. You're afforded a lot of freedom as an officer in a lot of different ways. People will know if you're scamming, you're taking off early, or you're doing a job or something like that. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you show up and you do the job, that's going to give you that credit with everyone else. So show up and do the job.
All right. Lieutenant, sir, thank you so much for coming back to the battalion, checking out our podcast, and being on the show. Awesome. Thank you.